Bounce back win for us today. I thought we started the game with the right tone on the defensive end, and so that was a.
Hear me out. You won't believe what just happened behind closed doors at USA Basketball because one quiet confirmation just turned Caitlin Clark's Team USA future into a full-blown nightmare.
A lot of contributions. Obviously, Ashlyn in the first half really got hot there, and she has that ability in a quarter and a half to kind of get going, and so it was nice to see her kind of break out.
For months, fans were told to stop overreacting and to accept that Caitlin Clark being left off Team USA was simply about fit, timing, and experience. But that story is now collapsing in real time as new leaks and confirmations rip apart the official narrative. It exposes a power struggle that threatens to permanently sever the biggest star in women's basketball from the national team.
Yeah, I've been working really hard to get back to full health, and I feel like probably over these last couple of weeks is when I've probably started feeling my best. Obviously, my ankle kind of.
What we are witnessing is no longer a debate about basketball philosophy, but a collision between ego, control, money, and fear. And the scariest part is that everyone involved seems willing to let the damage spread as long as their authority remains intact. But guess what? The truth has a way of leaking out, and when it does, it rarely favors the people trying to suppress it.
Spent so much time here in this building this season, just trying to get healthy and trying to kind of just get back to 100%. And honestly,
the moment that changed everything was not a press conference or a box score, but a series of quiet confirmations from inside Team USA circles that suggested Caitlin Clark's exclusion was not temporary, not strategic, and not accidental. According to multiple insiders, the decision makers did not view her as a future cornerstone waiting her turn, but as a problem to be managed before she became too powerful to control. That is the line no one was supposed to cross, yet it explains every confusing move that followed, from the cold public statements to the awkward silences to the subtle but unmistakable signals that she was never truly welcome in the room.
Probably one of the worst sprains I've dealt with, but I've just tried to stay positive the best I can, and but I honestly feel like I'm in a really good spot, and people don't know.
At first, the explanation sounded reasonable to casual fans, because Team USA has always leaned on veteran dominance, chemistry, and system basketball, and the idea that a rookie might need time felt familiar, almost comforting. But as the season unfolded and Caitlin Clark continued to dominate attention, ratings, and conversation across the sport, the logic started to crumble. Hold on for what's coming, because the cracks became impossible to ignore once insiders began confirming that the fear was never about her defense or her physicality, but about the audience she brings with her.
Some more pain in my right groin, and then obviously had some tests and other things done, and there was no decision of like, this is the end of my season. I had full intention of returning, and
behind the scenes, officials reportedly worried that Caitlin Clark's popularity would hijack the spotlight, that her fans would demand minutes, touches, and attention, and that any perceived slight would become a headline. Instead of seeing that attention as fuel for the sport, they saw it as a threat to their control. In other words, she was not too weak to make the roster, she was too powerful, and that distinction changes everything about how this situation should be understood. Then came the confirmation that stunned even longtime observers, the revelation that internal discussions framed her presence as a liability rather than an asset. That single detail flipped the entire story on its head, because it meant Team USA was not protecting competitive integrity, but protecting hierarchy. They were not asking how to win the most games or grow the sport, but how to maintain authority in an era where one player could outshine the system itself. That is not basketball logic, that is institutional panic, and once panic sets in, decisions stop making sense. The situation escalated when reports surfaced about how Caitlin Clark was treated during limited interactions with the program, including decisions that many interpreted as deliberate attempts to minimize her identity. In basketball culture, symbols matter, and nothing symbolizes a player more than her number, her role, and her freedom on the court. When those are stripped away, the message is clear even if it is never spoken aloud. You are not special here, and you will not be allowed to become bigger than us. What made this even more explosive was the growing perception perception that the head coach was not a neutral party, but an active force shaping the resistance. Public comments urging fans to calm down the hype, dismissive tones when asked about Clark's impact, and a refusal to acknowledge the business reality of her popularity all fed into the same narrative. This was not about patience, it was about containment. And once that perception took hold, every subsequent move was viewed through a lens of distrust. But here's where the story took an unexpected turn, because Caitlin Clark did not respond the way the system expected her to. There were no emotional outbursts, no public complaints, no desperate attempts to appease decision makers. Instead, there was silence. And that silence was louder than any statement could have been. By choosing to step back, to prioritize her own development and well-being, she shifted the power dynamic in a way that made executives deeply uncomfortable. From a business standpoint, her absence is devastating because ratings data does not lie. Games featuring Caitlin Clark consistently outperform those without her, and sponsors are acutely aware of that gap. Networks plan narratives, advertisers plan campaigns, and global events like the Olympics rely on stars to carry attention across borders. A Team USA without its most recognizable player is not just a basketball risk, it is a financial gamble, and insiders suggest that frustration is boiling over in boardrooms where patience is thin and expectations are high. This is where speculation begins to swirl, because when money and ego collide, something usually gives. There are whispers that pressure is mounting to reevaluate leadership, to soften stances, or to quietly repair relationships before the damage becomes irreversible. At the same time, there are equally persistent rumors that the current leadership would rather dig in than admit miscalculation, even if it means alienating the very player who could define the next decade of the sport. The divide is now impossible to ignore, because it is no longer just about Caitlin Clark, but about the future direction of women's basketball itself. On one side stands tradition, seniority, and rigid control, while on the other stands visibility, star power, and a new generation of fans who engage with the game differently. This is not a clash that can be resolved with a roster tweak or a carefully worded statement, because it cuts to the core of who the sport is for and who gets to decide that. What makes the situation especially dangerous is the historical precedent, because sports history is littered with examples of institutions misjudging stars at pivotal moments. When those mistakes are made early in a player's career, the consequences echo for decades. Caitlin Clark does not need Team USA to validate her greatness, but Team USA may soon realize it needs her far more than it anticipated, especially as global competition intensifies and attention spans shrink. Speculation has now reached the point where fans are asking an unthinkable question. Is this effectively the end of Caitlin Clark's Team USA career before it ever truly began? If the same leadership remains in place, if the same mindset dominates decision-making, and if trust continues to erode, there is little incentive for her to re-enter an environment that has shown open discomfort with her presence. That possibility alone should be setting off alarms, yet public acknowledgement remains conspicuously absent. Meanwhile, every sold-out arena, every viral highlight, and every spike in viewership only strengthens her leverage. Without saying a word, she is demonstrating her value in the most measurable way possible, and that reality is impossible to spin away. The longer this standoff drags on, the clearer it becomes that the original leak did not damage Caitlin Clark. It exposed the insecurity of the system trying to contain her. The tragedy is that this conflict was entirely avoidable because by all accounts, Caitlin Clark has never demanded special treatment or attempted to undermine teammates. Her style of play elevates others, her work ethic is widely praised, and her impact has brought unprecedented attention to the league. Yet instead of embracing that momentum, decision makers chose fear over vision, control over growth, and politics over progress. As the countdown to future international competitions continues, the stakes could not be higher. A home Olympics on the horizon should be a celebration of everything women's basketball has become, but right now the script feels uncomfortably close to self-sabotage. Imagine the optics of leaving the sport's most influential player on the sidelines, not because of injury or decline, but because the system could not adapt to her presence. Ultimately, this situation forces a simple but uncomfortable question into the open. Who truly owns the game? Is it governed solely by committees and coaches, or does it belong to the fans whose passion fuels its growth? The backlash to these leaks suggests that the answer may not align with what leadership expects, and once that realization sets in, the pressure to change becomes unavoidable. This is not the end of Caitlin Clark's story, but it may be the beginning of a reckoning for Team USA.